Lovely people, welcome back to another Story Study Saturday. I'm Sammy, and I'm a writer who likes to learn about writing through reading and share what I learned with you. This week we are talking about Spells for Forgetting by Adrienne Young. I literally got this book the moment that it was available, exclusively because of how great Fable and Namesake were, and I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I know that if I hadn't read Adrienne Young's writing before, I probably wouldn't have picked up this book just because the cover kind of screams suspense, and I don't really typically read suspense. But we'll get into that in a little bit. Aside from the cover and the title, I had no idea what this was about. And if you are unlike me, here is a summary. On an island unlike any other where magic runs through the women, an unsolved mystery ruins more than just the island's reputation with the outside world, but also the lives of a few select people who live there. What happens when the prime suspect returns home after nearly a decade and a half? Is there room for true love to flourish in a world that is caked with secrets, death, and magic? So let's get into my thoughts on this one. I don't normally go for suspense. I'm not into it normally. I usually don't really like it. It feels like they take cheap shots at you and then you're like, how dare you? Not necessarily always like, oh my god, I can't believe that happened. I usually feel offended by how the suspense is built, or it like bothers me that they just won't tell me what I need to know, and I end up like cycling away from it. But this one I don't feel like had as many of those aspects, and I did enjoy it. I also enjoyed the use of multiple perspectives to a certain point, and then I disliked it for a couple of chapters, and then I really liked it again. So that was a unique experience. I also really enjoyed how the history was presented in this story, because a lot of it comes from something that happened in the past. The way that sometimes it was presented using flashbacks and sometimes it was presented using memories, depending on how important that scene was versus how important the present moment was really interesting, because if the characters were more invested in the present moment, you wouldn't cut away to a flashback. It would be shown to the reader through memory, like a memory popping up in the present moment. And then the moments that the previous scene were super important, we would go into a whole chapter that was just a flashback. That would get us that information that we needed on that particular scene. I think that was done really, really well, because it shows the importance in a very subtle way of where your focus should lie, whether it's in the present or the past. This is also the kind of story that when you're told that everybody on the island, all of the women on the island have magic, you know pretty much what happened, because the crime is really confusing because of how the girl died on the island. But if you know that there's magic, you know that some kind of magic was done, and that's what led it to how it was happening. And it's strange to think that nobody who lived on the island thought that magic might have played a part, but because you know as a reader with that dramatic irony that magic had to have done something, you're desperate to know how and why and who and when and where and all of those details, because you know what did it, but you don't know how it happened. And I think that adds to the suspense in a way that's not patronizing. There's also these really poetic and beautiful descriptions of the world and like the space around them and how the island claims things for her own. And it's really beautiful how that's done. It ends up tying in really, really well with one of the perspectives we get towards the end of the book in those multiple perspective chapters that I adored. So what do I think could be improved about this book? I think that we spent too much time in August and Emery, the two main characters, the love interests of this book. I think we spent too much time in their perspectives, that when we got other people's perspectives, because we were just like August, Emery, August, Emery, August, Emery, August, Emery, and then we got somebody else's perspective, and I was like, who are you? Why are you here? What? Get out of my face, I don't know you. And then I just had to like get a couple more chapters where we got other people's perspectives besides August and Emery, that I was like, okay, fine, this is just how it's happening. But I think if it went like August, Emery, someone else, August, Emery, and then we had those sprinkled in earlier in the story, it would have been less of a jarring experience, because we would have known that it's not just an August Emery perspective switch. But it is required for multiple people to have perspectives chapters in this book besides August and Emery, because that's a really important part of how you get to the end. And I understand that. That's why I just think you should have them earlier on in the story, so that it's not like, wow, Who are you? Halfway through the book, you've gotten used to the system of August Emery. I'm also kind of bothered by the fact that there were a few loose ends that were just left untied, and I don't think that they warrant having a like sequel to tie up those loose ends. I just wish that we had more information on those because they led to some questions that I had, but they weren't tied up in the end. But I don't have enough questions to be like, yeah, I would read a whole book to just tie up those ends. Maybe I would. Maybe I would. I don't know. I might, but I don't think that after finishing the book that I would have. I just want answers. But if it was offered to me, I don't think I would say no. Because there's just like, there's so much magic and witchcraft and things going on in this particular book that it's like, there's things happening. And we get a teaser at 2 different situations where it's like, what's happening there? What is the deal with the witchcraft there? And you just sort of want to know the rest of it. But it's not important to August or Emery, so we don't know. It's in those other perspectives that don't come up as often as August and Emery's do. So what can writers learn from this book? Something I learned from this book is that sometimes there are things that you don't like, but you don't know why you don't like them. And then when you see something that doesn't do the thing that you don't like, you get your eyes open to a new perspective. So for me, I don't like suspense. This was suspense. I enjoyed it a lot because it didn't do some things that I think that other suspense books do, which means that suspense isn't totally off the table for me to write. It's just that I would have to read more to be able to identify the things that I don't like that suspense does, and then find more things that I do like that suspense does, so that it would be more of an option for me. That could have been really confusing, I'm not sure, but it opened my eyes to a new genre that I have not had my eyes open to in a positive light yet. This book is also a good example of the exact opposite of an insta-love. Like 10 out of 10, absolute full 180. Totally different, not even on the same plane of existence, totally different from an insta-love. Amazing, really, really great. It's not gonna work for every story, and that's okay, but it's very much the exact opposite. So if you needed an example of how to do something that is drastically different from what is done in insta-love stories, this is the one. This is the opposite. I also think that this is a good example of dropping clues at a consistent and effective pace, where it's not necessarily bombarding you with hints or clues or anything, and it's not just keeping them to themselves because they're too big of clues for you to figure it out. There's just enough that you're like, oh my god, that's a piece. Oh my god, that's a piece. How do those pieces fit together? But you're missing like the piece that goes in between those two, and you're like, oh my god. And then when you find the middle piece, you're like, wow, and then the book's over because you figured it out. And it's really rewarding every time you find a piece, and every time a piece connects to another piece, you're like, oh, okay, so that's how that works out. Oh, okay, so that's how that works out. Oh, okay, wow, I can't believe that. Oh, okay, wow. And even dropping in some clues that aren't really clues that are like the opposite direction of the clues that you want to go in. Those were really effective in turning you, because you're like, that doesn't fit with everything else that I know. How is that? Why are we being told that? And it's literally just to throw you off the right track, and it works. So I think that this is a really good example of that. I don't really interact super often with mysteries or thrillers, so this is probably something that is common in those, but it's also something that could be used for just general storytelling in a way that you're trying to defeat a conflict that you don't necessarily know what you're up against, which I've seen used in fantasy. This could be an example that effectively helps build out other genres as well. But that is all that I've got for you today. Have you read Spells for Forgetting? I know it's been out for a very short amount of time, so let me know. Are you planning to read it? Are you a suspense reader? If you're a suspense reader, let me know in the comments any really good suspense books that don't feel like they're throwing cheap shots at you, because I would love to know. I'm very curious if there are more out there and I just have like a bad experience with some in the past. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. It'll really help me out. If you don't want to miss any of my uploads, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell next to it. I'm here every Tuesday for Writing Tip Tuesdays and Saturdays for Story Study Saturdays. So I'll see you guys back here on Tuesday.